Hello, everyone. I am the sleep storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a lot. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you from and what time are you listening? Now get comfortable and relax. The rain draped over the ancient towers of Hogwarts like a silken curtain, soft and unrelenting, casting ripples across the black lake as distant thunder rumbled through the sky. The castle stood undisturbed by time, its glow a beacon of history and magic. Yet deep within its corridors, something was stirring, something that had lain dormant for far too long. Harry Potter, now head of the Auror department, walked briskly through the Ministry of Magic, his brow furrowed as he clutched a report filled with unsettling details. 7 disappearances in 3 months, all connected by a single thread. The missing children were all descendants of reformed Death Eaters. The pattern gnawed at him, an echo of the past refusing to be silenced. His footsteps quickened as he approached his office, pushing the door open to find Hermione Granger Weasley, now the Minister for Magic, standing by his desk with a grave expression. The morning light from the enchanted window cast long shadows, accentuating the worry in her eyes as she held up another file. Theodore Knott's son disappeared last night, Hermione said without preamble, her voice taut with urgency. No sign of struggle, no magical residue left behind. Harry exhaled sharply, dropping the report onto the desk as he ran a hand through his unruly black hair. Same as the others, he muttered. It's as if they vanish into thin air. Hermione nodded grimly, flipping through the pages. And this symbol, she said, turning the file to reveal a photograph. The image showed a carved mark subtle, almost imperceptible, on a wooden bedpost. A serpent devouring its own tail, woven with delicate runes. Harry's stomach tightened at the sight of it. The Department of Mysteries identified the runes, Hermione continued, lowering her voice. They predate Merlin. This isn't just some rogue dark wizard, Harry. This is ancient magic. Before either of them could say another word, the emerald flames in the fireplace flared to life, revealing Draco Malfoy's face, his normally composed features marred by panic. Potter, he said, his voice clipped but urgent. You need to come to the Manor. Now, it's Scorpius. He's received a warning. They're coming for him next. Without hesitation, Harry grabbed his wand, exchanging a quick look with Hermione before stepping into the flames, feeling the familiar pull of flute travel as the world spun and reformed around him. He emerged in the grand study of Malfoy Manor, where Draco stood beside his wife, Astoria, both as pale as ghosts. Scorpius Malfoy, barely 16, sat in an armchair, clutching a piece of parchment in trembling hands. The boy looked up as Harry arrived, his usually bright gray eyes clouded with fear. Mr. Potter, he said, his voice unsteady. They say they're going to cleanse me of my father's betrayal. Harry took the parchment, his jaw tightening as he read the message. The same runes, the same symbol, but this ancient wards were layered upon one another, designed to turn whatever dark magic these attackers wielded against them. And then they waited. Midnight approached on the second night, when the first breach of the wards was detected. A chill ran through the air as hooded figures emerged from the darkness, their masks not the silver of old Death Eaters, but a polished bronze, sculpted into the shapes of writhing serpents. Harry stood at the ready, his wand raised, Hermione beside him, and Draco just behind, prepared to fight for the son he had sworn to protect. The battle erupted in a blur of spellfare, the air crackling with magic, as curses and counterspells collided in bursts of red, blue, and gold. The custodians of pure blood, as they called themselves, fought with a ferocity Harry hadn't seen in decades, wielding magic so ancient it defied the laws wizards understood. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: redemption. Side by side, Harry, Draco, and Hermione fought, proving with every spell that choices made in the past did not define the future. The very walls of Malfoy Manor trembled as the enchanted protections activated, reflecting the attackers' dark magic back upon them, revealing their true forms, descendants of the very dark wizards they sought to purify from existence. One by one, they fell, bound by shimmering chains of light, conjured by Hermione's swift incantations. As the dust settled, Harry found himself face to face with the leader of the group, a wizard he recognized from old ministry records, a former unspeakable who had lost his family to Death Eaters decades ago. "You don't understand," the man spat, his voice filled with fury. "Their blood is tainted. The children of Death Eaters will always carry the darkness within them." Harry's emerald gaze held steady, his voice quiet but firm. "No," he said. "The only taint is the one you create when you refuse to believe people can change." He looked at Scorpius, standing beside his father, his hands clenched into fists, but his expression resolute. "The worst mark isn't the one on their arms," Harry continued. "It's the one you put on their souls by telling them they can never be more than their past." In the days that followed, the missing children were found, unharmed, but held in a magical stasis, waiting for their so-called purification. Hermione worked tirelessly to dismantle the remnants of the custodians' network, while Harry ensured protections for the families who had once stood on the wrong side of history. As he sealed the last case file, his gaze fell on a photograph on his desk, one of Albus and Scorpius at Hogwarts, arms around each other. Their Slytherin robes a mark, not of division, but of camaraderie. And for the first time in a long time, Harry felt the weight of the past begin to lift, knowing that this victory won not against a dark lord, but against the darkness of prejudice, was just as important as the first. The corridors of the ministry hummed with quiet urgency, whispers of the recent attack at Malfoy Manor weaving through the air like an unseen current. Though the custodians of pure blood had been defeated, the unease remained. It wasn't just about the 7 children who had been taken. It was about the ideology behind it, the unsettling knowledge that even after Voldemort, even after 2 wars, stood nearby, flipping through an ancient tome she had retrieved from the Department of Mysteries. Her brows knitted in thought. "There's something more to this," she murmured, her fingers trailing over a page filled with runes. These symbols, they weren't just a warning. They were part of an incantation, and it wasn't just about blood purity. Harry looked up from his report, frowning. "Then what was it about?" Hermione hesitated, then turned the book toward him. "I think they were trying to awaken something, or someone." The words sent a chill through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his days at Hogwarts. Facing the unknown with nothing but his wand and instinct. A sharp knock at the door broke their focus. Ron Weasley entered, his aura robes slightly rumpled, his expression unusually tense. "We've got another problem," he announced, "and you're not going to like it." He tossed a parchment onto Harry's desk. The edges were burnt, the ink smeared as if written in haste. It was a message, simple yet ominous. "You stopped us once. You won't stop what comes next. The old blood awakens." Silence stretched between them, the weight of the words pressing down like an unseen hand. "Old blood," Ron muttered. "That doesn't sound promising." Hermione's fingers tightened around the edges of the book. "It's not. The term appears in some of the oldest magical texts, referring to ancient wizarding families, yes, but also to something else. There were once factions of magic users who believed in the power of ancestry, not just as a matter of lineage, but as a means of magical supremacy. Some claimed that ancient bloodlines held the ability to control lost forms of magic." Harry exhaled slowly. So they weren't just kidnapping these children to eliminate them. They were trying to find something in them. A connection. Hermione nodded. A key. The words had barely settled in the air when a patroness burst into the room. A silvery serpent coiling in midair, before speaking in a familiar voice, Draco. "Potter, it's Scorpius." "He's," the voice cut out, the message dissolving into mist. Harry didn't wait. He was already on his feet, Ron and Hermione moving with him as they apparated straight to Malfoy Manor. They arrived in the drawing room to find Draco packing, his hands clenched at his sides. Astoria stood beside him, her face pale. Scorpius sat in a chair near the fireplace, visibly shaken, his fingers wrapped tightly around a small object. A pendant, silver, with a serpent carved into it one Harry recognized instantly. It was a family heirloom, something passed through generations of Malfoys. "It was glowing," Scorpius said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I heard voices." Draco shot Harry a look, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Tell him," he said to his son. Scorpius swallowed. "They spoke to me, the voices. They told me my blood remembers." Hermione inhaled sharply. "The old blood." Harry moved closer, kneeling beside the boy. "Scorpius, do you recognize the voices? Were they familiar?" The teenager shook his head. "No, they weren't normal voices. They felt ancient, like they had been waiting a long time to be heard." The pendant pulsed faintly in Scorpius's hands, as if responding to the conversation. Harry exchanged glances with Hermione, who was already flipping through pages of the his arms, meaning Hermione's voice was grim. A bloodline awakening, a ritual to call upon the magic of their ancestors to bring forth knowledge and power long buried. And if they were willing to take children for it, then they're willing to go to any lengths to succeed. The words had barely left her lips when a gust of wind swept through the room, though the windows remained shut. The flames in the fireplace flickered violently before dimming to a smoldering ember. The pendant in Scorpius's hands grew unbearably hot, forcing him to drop it. As it clattered to the floor, the runes on its surface flared, and a voice, low, guttural, and ancient, filled the air. Blood remembers, blood calls, the time has come. The voice echoed through the manor, shaking the very walls. Dust drifted from the ceiling as though the house itself was responding. Harry raised his wand instinctively, Ron doing the same, while Draco placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. Hermione's eyes darted across the pages, searching for something, anything, that could explain what was happening. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the voice faded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The pendant lay still, its glow gone, but its message unmistakable. Ron exhaled. Well, that was horrifying. Draco's fingers dug into the armrest of the chair. They're going to come for him again. Harry nodded, and we're going to be ready. The days that followed were filled with preparation. The Aurors worked tirelessly to uncover the remaining custodians, but they had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only traces of their dark magic. The Ministry reinforced protections, layering wards over homes, schools, and even the children themselves. But no matter how many spells they cast, the words from the pendant lingered in Harry's mind. Blood remembers, blood calls. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And whatever was coming, it was older, darker, and far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced before. The weight of the message clung to them like an unwelcome specter, its presence lingering in every thought, every hurried conversation. The old blood was stirring, calling across generations, and though Harry had spent years fighting threats to the wizarding world, this felt different. This wasn't about dark wizards seeking power. It was something more primal, something deeply woven into the fabric of magical ancestry. And it had chosen Scorpius Malfoy as its harbinger. The boy had barely slept since that night, haunted by whispers that only he could hear. Though the pendant lay dormant now, its brief awakening had left something behind, an unseen force tethered to him, a connection that pulsed beneath his skin like an echo of forgotten magic. Draco, ever the pragmatist, had doubled the protective enchantments around the manor. But even he knew that spells alone wouldn't be enough. At the Ministry, Hermione spent hours poring over ancient texts, searching for any reference to bloodline awakenings. It's rare, she explained when Harry found her in her office. Stacks of parchment spread across her desk, her quill tapping absently against a page. Most wizarding families lost the ability to tap into ancestral magic centuries ago. few who still held the knowledge, custodians of forgotten bloodlines, guardians of power that predates Hogwarts itself. She hesitated before adding, and they didn't just guard knowledge. They ensured that only those deemed worthy could access it. Harry frowned. You think the custodians of pure blood weren't just kidnapping these children to purify bloodlines? You think they were trying to unlock something? Hermione nodded. Scorpius wasn't just a target, Harry. He was a vessel. The pendant reacted to him for a reason. She flipped to a page filled with faded ink, pointing to a passage that sent a chill through him. There will come a time when the old blood will rise again, called forth by the voice of its kin. The heir of the serpent shall awaken the past, and in doing so, open the path to the lost magic of the first wizards. The heir of the serpent, Harry murmured. Hermione met his gaze. Salazar Slytherin's line. For a long moment, neither spoke. The implications were staggering. The Malfoys had always been tied to Slytherin's legacy, but Draco had never claimed any direct connection to the founder. And yet, if the bloodline had remained intact in secrecy, if Scorpius was somehow the key to something ancient, then this was bigger than anything they had imagined. Before they could process it further, a sharp knock at the door startled them. Ron entered, his face set in a grim expression. We've got trouble, he said, tossing a file onto the desk. A new disappearance, but this time there's a witness. Harry grabbed the file, scanning the contents quickly. The victim was 15-year-old Cassius Flint, son of former Slytherin Marcus Flint, another child of a reformed Death Eater. But the difference this time, he hadn't vanished without a trace. A house elf had seen everything. Within the hour, Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood in a dimly lit parlor, facing a trembling house elf named Dobby, named, as it turned out, after the legendary elf who had once saved Harry's life. The young elf's ears twitched nervously as he wrung his hands together. Dobby saw them take Master Cassius, he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. They came through the walls like shadows. They did not use wands. Harry's stomach twisted. They didn't use wands. The elf shook his head rapidly. No, sir. They whispered strange words, and the magic bent to them. It was old magic, deeper than wands, deeper than spells. Hermione paled. That confirms it, she murmured. They're not just using ancestral magic. They're wielding something much older. Ron exhaled sharply. And I'm guessing it's not the friendly kind. Harry crouched down, his voice steady but firm. Dobby, did they say anything before they took Cassius? The elf hesitated, his large eyes darting between them before he whispered. They said the air is waking. They said soon, the serpent will remember. Silence settled over the room, thick with unspoken dread. Harry rose, his mind racing. They're accelerating their plans. He turned to Hermione. If we don't stop this now, we're going to see more than just disappearances. Ron flexed his fingers, as if bracing himself. Then, what's the next move? Hermione tapped the book on the desk. find out exactly what they're trying to awaken. Harry nodded, and we stop them before it's too late. The weight of what they had uncovered pressed down on them as they worked late into the night, searching for anything that could explain what the custodians were trying to awaken. Ancient texts, hidden histories, and forgotten rituals. It all pointed to something vast, something buried so deeply in the past that even the most extensive ministry records barely touched upon it. Hermione traced her fingers over the brittle parchment of a particularly old document. Its ink faded, but still legible beneath the flickering candlelight. "If they're calling upon the old blood," she murmured, "then they're trying to access magic that hasn't been used for centuries. Magic that predates modern wands, spellwork, everything we know." Ron, who had been flipping through another book with visible frustration, groaned and pushed it aside. All right, so they want to wake up some ancient magic. But what does that mean? Are we talking about another Dark Lord situation? Some hidden curse? A giant snake again? Harry, staring at the flickering embers in the fireplace, exhaled slowly. "No," he said, his voice edged with certainty. "It's bigger than that. This isn't just about power. It's about rewriting the balance of magic itself." He turned to Hermione. "What do we know about bloodline awakenings? What happens when they succeed?" Hermione hesitated before answering. According to these texts, a true bloodline awakening doesn't just enhance magic, it changes the person entirely. The magic of their ancestors becomes theirs, their knowledge, their abilities. It's why most of these rituals were lost over time. They were too unpredictable. Some wizards emerged stronger, more powerful. Others lost themselves entirely. Ron rubbed his face with both hands. Brilliant. So either Scorpius gets turned into some kind of super wizard, or he ends up a hollowed out shell of himself. That's just what we need. Harry clenched his jaw. We're not letting it get that far. A knock at the door interrupted them. An Auror stepped inside, looking pale. "Sir," he addressed Harry, "we have something you need to see. It's about Cassius Flint." The three of them followed the Auror through the ministry halls, past the enchanted lifts, down into the lower levels where secured holding rooms were kept. Inside one of the rooms, under heavy guard, sat Cassius Flint. His face was blank, his eyes unfocused, as if staring through everything around him. His fingers twitched against the chair's armrest, though his movements were slow, almost mechanical. Harry stepped forward cautiously. "Cassius." The boy didn't react. Hermione moved beside him, her voice soft. "Cassius, can you hear us?" A long pause. Then, without warning, Cassius's lips parted, and a voice, not his own, whispered into the dimly lit room. "The air remembers. The blood has answered. The door is opening." Every hair on Harry's arms stood on end. Hermione gasped. They did it. They didn't need to take him away. Whatever ritual they performed, it worked. The awakening has already started. Ron took a step back. "Tell me that doesn't mean what I think it means." Cassius's fingers walls, once dark, now gleamed with a faint silver sheen. "He is coming," the eerie voice murmured. "The serpent's heir will rise, and the old world will return." Harry didn't wait to hear more. "Get healers in here, now." The guards rushed to obey, but Harry was already turning toward Hermione. "We don't have time. If they've already begun the awakening, we need to find out what's coming next before they try to use Scorpius." Hermione's hands were shaking as she flipped through her book. If Cassius is already changed, then Scorpius is next. They're going to come for him. Ron swore under his breath. "Then we make sure they don't get the chance." Within the hour, the plan was in motion. Scorpius was moved under ministry protection, hidden in a secure location, while Aurors reinforced every possible entrance. But Harry knew deep down that it wasn't enough, because if the custodians had already begun the awakening, then it wasn't just Scorpius they were after anymore. It was everything his blood carried. The storm arrived without warning. Winds howled through the night as lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the towering silhouette of Malfoy Manor. But inside, the true battle was yet to begin. Hidden within the most secure chamber the Ministry could conjure, Scorpius sat in uneasy silence, his hands clasped together, his thoughts a storm of their own. Though the Aurors stationed outside assured him he was safe, he could feel it, something unseen, something ancient, calling to him from beyond the walls. Harry stood by the entrance, watching the protective enchantments shimmer faintly in the dim candlelight. Hermione paced nearby, muttering incantations under her breath as she reinforced every spell they had placed. Ron sat with his wand balanced on his knee, his grip tight. None of them spoke, but they all knew the truth. The custodians would come. Scorpius broke the silence first. "I can still hear them." Harry turned to him, the voices. The boy nodded. "They're whispering now, but they're growing stronger. They keep saying the same thing, that I must remember, that my blood holds the key." He exhaled sharply. "I don't know what they want from me." Hermione's fingers trembled as she turned another page of her book. "They don't need you to understand, Scorpius. They just need your blood to respond. The ritual isn't about choice, it's about inevitability. They believe that once the awakening starts, it can't be stopped." Ron scoffed. "Well, we'll see about that." Before anyone could respond, the air shifted. A deep pressure settled over the room, making the flames flicker violently. The protective wards flared bright blue, then cracked like ice, splintering into fragments of light before vanishing completely. The custodians were here. Harry reacted first. "Get ready." The shadows in the room stretched unnaturally as figures emerged from the darkness itself. Cloaked figures, faces hidden behind bronze masks, their robes adorned with ancient runes that pulsed with eerie light. They moved soundlessly, their presence unnatural, as if they did not entirely belong to this world. The leader stepped forward. "You cannot stop what has already begun." Harry raised his wand. "I've heard that before. forcing him to dive out of the way as a streak of green light missed him by inches. But it was Scorpius they wanted. One of the custodians broke through the chaos, raising a dagger etched with runes, its blade glowing with raw power. Blood must answer blood, he intoned, his voice vibrating with ancient magic. He lunged. Scorpius's hand shot up. The entire room shook. A shockwave of unseen energy erupted from the boy, sending the custodians flying backward. The walls trembled as the very foundation of the manor groaned under the force of the awakening. Scorpius gasped, clutching his chest as silver light pulsed from beneath his skin, his veins glowing like molten metal. The whispers in his mind were no longer whispers. They were a roar. Voices overlapping, demanding, pleading, commanding. The leader of the custodians staggered to his feet, his mask cracked. "It has begun," he whispered in awe. Harry didn't hesitate. He fired a stunning spell that struck the man square in the chest, knocking him unconscious. The other custodians, seeing their leader fall, scrambled to retreat into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. But the damage had been done. Scorpius collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with terror. "I can hear them," he choked out. "All of them, their memories, their power. It's inside me." Harry knelt beside him. "Fight it, Scorpius. Whatever they started, we can stop it." Hermione knelt on the other side, already scanning her book frantically. "There has to be a reversal," she muttered. "There's always a way to counteract." Scorpius let out a strangled cry as another pulse of energy surged through him, sending another wave of magic rippling through the room. The air was thick with it, ancient and untamed, and Harry knew, with absolute certainty, that they were running out of time. The room crackled with raw, ancient power, an unseen force coiling around Scorpius like invisible chains. His breathing was uneven, his hands trembling as silver light flickered beneath his skin. The magic awakening inside him wasn't just overwhelming, it was reshaping him, pulling at something buried deep within his blood. Harry, Hermione, and Ron had faced countless dangers before, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle of spells, it was a battle against time itself. Hermione flipped desperately through the ancient tome, her eyes scanning line after line of forgotten magic. There has to whatever this is, you are stronger than them. Scorpius's eyes flickered between silver and gray as he struggled to focus. It's too loud, he gasped. They're in my head, the voices. They won't stop. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the moment he did, another pulse of energy radiated outward, shaking the walls and extinguishing every candle in the room. Darkness swallowed them whole. Harry's wand lit instantly, illuminating the chamber in a faint glow. But the shadows had thickened, growing darker, heavier, swirling in unnatural patterns against the walls. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was something else, something alive. A whisper slithered through the air, cold and ancient. The air has awakened. The serpent stirs. The past will rise again. Hermione's breath hitched. That wasn't Scorpius. A sudden gust of wind roared through the chamber as the shadows began to coalesce, twisting together into something humanoid, something wrong. A figure emerged, its form flickering like a mirage, draped in dark robes, its face hidden beneath a hood, its presence as heavy as the weight of centuries. The air around it shimmered with the same silver energy that pulsed within Scorpius. Harry's grip on his wand tightened. "Who are you?" The figure's voice was barely more than a whisper, yet it echoed through the room like 1,000 voices speaking at once. "We are the forgotten, the first, the last, the true heirs of the serpent's blood." Draco stepped protectively in front of his son, his wand raised. "Stay away from him." The figure did not move, but the shadows at its feet twisted unnaturally, spreading like ink across the stone floor. "You misunderstand," it murmured. "He belongs to us. His blood remembers. And now, so shall he." Scorpius let out a pained gasp as the silver light around him intensified, his entire body trembling under the force of it. The shadows reached for him, creeping toward his feet like living tendrils. Harry acted on instinct. Pratigo. A shimmering barrier erupted between Scorpius and the entity, forcing the shadows to recoil with a hiss. But the figure merely tilted its head, as though amused. Hermione's fingers flew over the book's pages. "This isn't a ghost," she whispered urgently. "It's a manifestation of ancestral magic, an imprint of those who wielded this power before. Scorpius is linked to them." She swallowed hard. "And if we don't stop this now, they'll take him completely." Ron shot a curse at the figure, but it passed through harmlessly, absorbed into the darkness. "Brilliant," he muttered. "Can't hit it, can't talk it down. What now?" Draco turned to Harry, his expression desperate. "Fix this." Harry looked at Scorpius, who was rapidly losing control, his body rigid with strain, his breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. There was only one thing left to do. Harry dropped to one knee beside him. "Scorpius, listen to me." His voice was calm, steady. "You are not them. You are not their puppet. You are your own person." Scorpius clenched his fists, his knuckles white. I don't know how to make it stop." "You don't need to stop it," Harry said firmly. Draco knelt beside him, gripping his son's hands tightly. Yes, you are. The shadows surged again, pressing against Harry's barrier. The voice hissed, furious now. You cannot deny what is already written in blood. He is ours. Harry turned his gaze toward the figure, his expression unreadable. You made one mistake, he said. The shadows pulsed, confused. We make no mistakes. Harry's emerald eyes burned with determination. You underestimated him. Scorpius's fingers twitched. His breathing slowed. The silver light around him flickered. But this time, it wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. Focused. The shadows hesitated, as if sensing the shift. Scorpius exhaled, his voice steady now. Get out. A shockwave of silver magic erupted from him, surging outward in all directions. The shadows shrieked as they were torn apart, unraveling into wisps of nothingness. The figure let out a final, shuddering whisper. Asterisk, asterisk, this is not the end, asterisk, asterisk, before vanishing entirely. The silence that followed was deafening. Scorpius slumped forward, but Draco caught him before he could collapse. His skin was still faintly glowing, but the chaotic energy had settled. The storm had passed. Harry exchanged a look with Hermione, both of them still on edge. Ron exhaled. I'm not saying that was the worst thing I've ever seen, but yeah, no, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. Draco held onto his son tightly. It's over, he murmured. But even as he spoke the words, they all knew the truth. It wasn't over, not yet. The air in the chamber was thick with the fatting remnants of magic. The silver light in Scorpius's veins finally dimming, leaving him exhausted but conscious. Draco held onto his son tightly, as though afraid to let go, while Harry, Hermione, and Ron remained tense, their wands still drawn, their breaths unsteady. The shadows were gone, but their presence lingered, an echo of something unfinished, something waiting. Scorpius sat up slowly, his expression dazed but alert. I could feel them, he whispered, like they were trying to pull me into something old, familiar, but it wasn't mine. He swallowed hard. It was theirs. Hermione ran a hand through her curls, exhaling sharply. That's because it was never about awakening your power, Scorpius. It was about taking it, merging their lost magic with yours. She hesitated, her voice lowering. And if we hadn't stopped them, they would have succeeded. Draco turned to her, his grip still firm on Scorpius's arm. But we did stop them. Harry shook his head. Not entirely. He knelt in front of Scorpius, his emerald eyes searching the boy's pale face. You broke their hold. You pushed them out. But they're still out there, waiting. The custodians wanted to bring back something ancient, something they believe is their right. And after tonight, they'll be more desperate than ever. Ron groaned, rubbing his face. So what now? We wait for the next shadowy nightmare to crawl out of the floor. Hermione snapped her book shut with a decisive thud. No, we find them before they try again. Harry stood, rolling his shoulders. We already know they aren't operating like normal dark wizards. They're not using traditional spellwork. They're wielding something older, something tied to blood itself. He turned to Draco. That means we need to go to the source. Draco's eyes narrowed. The source. Hermione nodded. The origins of Slytherin's bloodline. If they're trying to awaken his magic, then we need to understand what it was before it became legend. Scorpius inhaled sharply. The Chamber of Secrets. A heavy silence followed. Ron made a face. Oh, brilliant, because that place holds such fond memories. Draco stiffened. No one has set foot in that chamber since. He glanced at Harry. Since you. Harry nodded grimly. And if the custodians are trying to reclaim something from Slytherin's past, there's no better place for them to look. If there are any answers left, they'll be there. Scorpius sat forward, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Then we have to go. Draco turned sharply. No. Scorpius blinked, but no. Draco's voice was firm, his fingers tightening around his son's wrist. You've been through enough. This ends here. Scorpius met his father's gaze, determination flickering in his silver eyes. It won't end here, Dad. You heard them. They're still coming. If I don't figure out what they want from me, it's just going to happen again. He hesitated. I need to understand what's inside me. Draco's jaw clenched. And if going down there only makes it worse. Scorpius hesitated, then looked to Harry. I don't know, but if there's a chance we can stop them for good, don't we have to take it? Harry studied the boy for a long moment before nodding. We go, tonight. Ron let out a deep sigh. Of course we do. Because what's a crisis without at least one trip into a dark, cursed tunnel full of terrible memories? Hermione closed her book, slipping it into her bag. I'll gather what we need. Protective enchantments, reversal spells, anything that might help. Draco looked away, his expression unreadable. This is a mistake. Harry placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe, but it's the only move we've got. And as the storm raged on outside Malfoy Manor, they prepared to descend into the depths of the past, where the secrets of Slytherin's bloodline and the fate of Scorpius Malfoy waited in the darkness below. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets had remained sealed for decades, untouched since the day Harry had slain the basilisk beneath Hogwarts. Now, as they stood in the deserted second-floor girls' lavatory, the memory of that day weighed heavily upon him. The flickering torchlight reflected off the worn sinks, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Moaning Myrtle hovered near the ceiling, her translucent form watching them with interest. Back again. Are we? She mused, her voice echoing in the damp air. I do hope you brought another monster to slay. Scorpius swallowed hard. Not a monster, he murmured. At in years. Asterisk, asterisk, open. The sink trembled, the stone shifting and twisting as the hidden passageway revealed itself. A gust of cold air rushed upward from the depths, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and forgotten magic. Ron groaned. You know, I was really hoping I'd never have to see this place again. Hermione gave him a pointed look before casting protective charms around them. Let's not waste time. The custodians could be one step ahead of us. Draco hesitated before placing a firm hand on Scorpius's shoulder. Stay close to me, he ordered. Scorpius nodded, but there was something in his expression, determination, curiosity, maybe even defiance. Whatever had been awakened inside him had led him here, and now they had no choice but to see it through. One by one, they descended into the dark. The tunnels stretched endlessly, winding deeper into the very bones of the castle. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, thick with something unseen, yet undeniably present. The whispers started almost immediately soft at first, then rising in intensity, voices overlapping, murmuring in a language none of them recognized. Scorpius winced, gripping his temples. They're here, he whispered. Harry held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Where? Scorpius exhaled shakily. Everywhere. As if in answer, the walls around them shifted, runes flickering to life along the damp stone, glowing faintly in silver and green. The air crackled with energy, the same pulsing magic that had overtaken Scorpius at Malfoy Manor. Then the shadows moved. Figures emerged from the darkness, hooded, masked, their robes embroidered with ancient sigils. The custodians had arrived. You were always meant to come here, the leader intoned, stepping forward. His voice was calm, almost reverent. Your blood called you back to where it all began. Draco moved instinctively in front of his son, wand raised. You will not touch him. The leader tilted his head. We do not need to. His gaze shifted to Scorpius. He is already ours. Scorpius took an unsteady breath. I don't belong to you. A murmur rippled through the gathered custodians. The leader remained unfazed. You misunderstand, child. This is not about ownership. This is about destiny. Harry's patience snapped. Enough. We're ending this now. But before a single spell could be cast, the ground beneath them trembled. A deafening crack split the air as the floor gave way, sending them tumbling downward into darkness. The impact left them breathless. Dust and debris settled around them as they scrambled to their feet. The chamber they had fallen into was vast. The ceiling arched and covered in serpentine carvings. And at its center stood an altar, an ancient stone slab covered in shifting runes. Scorpius staggered forward, as if drawn by an unseen force. His veins pulsed with silver light, his breath coming in rapid gasps. This is it, he murmured. This is what they were trying to awaken. The custodians, having descended more gracefully, voice, the magic surged. A vortex of silver and green light erupted from the altar, spiraling around Scorpius, lifting him from the ground. He gasped as the energy latched onto him, trying to merge with his very being. Scorpius, Draco's voice was raw with fear. Harry acted on instinct. He rushed forward, ignoring the crackling magic, and seized Scorpius's wrist. "Listen to me," he commanded. "This power isn't yours. It's theirs. You don't have to take it." Scorpius's eyes flickered between silver and gray. I don't know how to stop it." Harry tightened his grip. "You already did once. Do it again." The custodian leader stepped forward, his voice rising over the chaos. "Accept your birthright, child. You were chosen for this." Scorpius's expression hardened. "No," he said, his voice steady now. "I choose for myself." With every ounce of willpower, he forced the magic back. The vortex shuddered, resisting, but Scorpius refused to let it consume him. He pushed harder, breaking free from its grasp, shattering the energy that bound him. The magic exploded outward, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The custodians recoiled as the altar cracked down the middle, its runes flickering one last time before fading into nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. The custodian leader looked around in stunned disbelief. "You fool," he whispered. "You've severed the connection. It's lost." Scorpius stepped forward, shoulders squared. Then it was never meant to be found. The remaining custodians, realizing their cause was now futile, vanished into the shadows, retreating into the very darkness they had emerged from. Harry turned to Scorpius, relief washing over him. "You all right?" Scorpius nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." Draco pulled his son into a tight embrace, his grip unyielding. "Never scare me like that again." Ron exhaled, shaking his head. "I swear, I'm done with ancient chambers after this." Hermione, brushing dust from her robes,